Lola Wright is going to join us now. She's on camera. I see her there. Um, I want to introduce Lola before we begin to our community. Lola is a change maker in the world. She's a woman who is of great insight and wisdom and passion and compassion, who has a very long resume that's filled with all types of credentials that I would be happy to read to you. But at the end of the day, those are just words on paper that support who you are as a being, that have made a commitment to make a true difference on our planet. And thank you for that. So thank you for being here, uh,
Mm,
Lola. Would you like to be
Thank
called
you.
Reverend Lola or Lola?
I'm good with Lola.
Okay,
Hmm.
good. Good. So Lola is here with us today. As you know, as a community, once a month we are having what's called Conversations with Keith, and today is one of those days. And Lola and I are going to have a conversation that will be the message that we have, and I'm going to pick some quotes to read to stimulate our conversation. And then from there, we'll see if any of you have questions that you would like to ask either Lola or me. Please feel free to put them in the chat window that's here on Zoom as well as through Facebook Live. And you can get those to us, and we'll be happy to answer those on the second portion of this. And so, just as Joel was singing about in today's world being a unique world, and I know that it's both individually unique for all of us in the world, but I know you're going through some changes in your world, Lola, based on just my knowing that in our conversation today. So the first quote that I'm going to read to us to stimulate this is this: the universe is not punishing you. It is simply sending you lessons and experiences needed for the evolution of your soul. You're always being pushed to grow. The things that you are going through are for your highest good and the highest good of others. What are your thoughts on that?
Certainly, my experience doesn't make it any more comfortable. But yeah, I think we draw unto ourselves, both personally and collectively, that which is needing and wanting to move us into a greater experience of expansion. And so we're oftentimes revealing our unconscious parts to bring them forward so that they can be healed, transformed, recalibrated, and reminded of the truth of existence, of life. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. I speak oftentimes, and one of my mantras in my ministry is that we're called here to either be tending to the evolution of our soul or not. We are either evolving or we're
Mm-hmm.
devolving, if that's the right word.
Hmm.
So yes, that's my feeling and belief, and I do believe that in that what I think that so oftentimes people get confused regarding evolution, that they think that it's this consistent move upward into a spiral of higher consciousness. But it's not that. It's literally that 2 steps up, 5 steps back, 4 steps up, 1 step back. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And our role in that is to be awake and alert and alive to what's transpiring, and to remember that we're not our experiences. We're not the effect. We're not what's going on, but we are one with that gives rise to that changing in a way that we desire, right? But
Yeah, I feel like, yeah.
go ahead. No,
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was just when I hear you say that, and what feels true for me in the work that I'm doing and in just what I'm witnessing, is there's like this deep desire for spiritual maturation.
Yes.
And when I hear you say all that you just said, it's like, oh, so what you're telling me is that evolution doesn't mean rainbows and unicorns.
No.
And it's like, yeah, exactly.
Well, it can mean rainbows and unicorns, but it
Sure.
doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case. One of our conversations before I had was with Dr. Jim Lockhart, and he was talking about what we're called to be today is to quit attempting to nurture our inner child and to nurture our inner adult, right?
That's so great. I love
Right?
that.
That we're here
Mm.
to not just philosophize on
Mm,
our philosophy,
mm. That is it. That is
right?
precisely it. Mhm.
And so that calling isn't because life is teaching us lessons. Dr. David Walker used to get all upset when he would say, life can't do that. And I agree with him, life can't do that. But certainly we can attract into our world opportunities to learn from
Yes.
what's going on. And if we don't, we're really not being a conscious evolutionist, you know?
Yeah, I think sometimes people can misunderstand some iteration of what you just read to think that there's some universe separate and outside of us that's
Uh-huh.
teaching us a lesson. And I don't think that's at all what that's saying. It's that we are intrinsically connected to all of existence and we are always calling forward that which wants to be known. We're always bringing our unconscious parts to view
Right.
such that they may be transformed, transmuted, activated, amplified, healed, like whatever you want to say.
Right. Good. All right. So the next quote I have is, there's no better, and I know this is going to be appropriate for you based on where you're at in the stage of your life. There's no better time to start working towards your dreams than right now.
Yes. I would say, and that's all we ever have anyway, right? So it's like in this now moment, who and what am I here to be, to do, to create? Um, yeah, that feels very, it's very easy to, this is what this reminds me of. I remember when my brother he was, had been married a couple years and his wife was like, I want to have a baby. I want to have a baby. And he had this number of dollars that needed to be in his bank account. And at that point, he'd be ready to have a baby. And I was like, dude, you'll get to that number and then there'll be another reason. Like, I'm not saying that you can't intentionally create when you want to have a baby, but like, there isn't ever going to be a perfect set of circumstances to bring forward the dream, the vision, the desire, the hope, the wanting. When it moves in you, let's go.
I agree with you. What that quote speaks, what speaks to me regarding that quote is a little different, in the sense that what it reminds me of is, now's the time to remember that we have the ability to dream.
Mm,
So
that's
for the
great.
dream to come true, we have to stop and begin to dream.
Mm,
And I think that, and I know I can speak, this is for myself as well, during these last 5 months, where it has felt for me, and I know that that's true for many people, that this pandemic and then what has subsequently transpired on our planet, and certainly in the political arena, um, just dealing with the minutia of every day has
mm,
been exhaustive, energy
mm,
wise. And I'll speak for myself, at moments have allowed it to be a prohibitor to stop and begin to dream again. And
mm,
so now, what this reminds me, and I believe it does for most of us, is that let's begin to dream again as to what's
mhm,
possible. Right?
mhm.
And it doesn't have to be that I'm going to rid the world and the universe of plastic, right? I mean, that's a big dream. But it
Mhm,
could be, I may do that for myself today, but it also could be, how can I make a difference in the lives of people that are around me today,
mhm,
so that I create a shift to just propagate good. Like
mhm,
that in alone, if that dream were to come true for 60% of us,
mhm.
then imagine the difference we're making on on the planet and in our world.
Yeah, the thought that comes up for me around that is, I'm imagining those of us that are gathered here today to some degree say we are philosophers, practitioners, uh, whatever of this thing called oneness, right? And that's like a big idea that can live very conceptually and very cognitively. And so if I am committed to the actualization or the realization of oneness in the human experience, I am in a reconciliation of where is that not fully alive in me.
Yes.
And so it's like I can take on major global issues or major national issues. And to your point, it's not that that may not be mine to do, but oftentimes those can also serve as distractions from the work that lives right where I am. So,
Yeah.
like this morning, I had a couple conversations with family members where I just felt a greater sense of disconnection than I felt connection. And I'm more committed to connection than I am to disconnection. And
Yes.
so I could distract myself around politics or, any number, like list them. And or I could go, where does this live right where I am? And what influence do I have in that? And it meant lots of tears. It meant reaching out to people that I could more easily write off and just put in a box in my head and X out of my heart. But that would be a breach of integrity if I say I'm a practitioner of this philosophy of oneness.
Girl, you are preaching, and I know that because that was my experience as well. Literally, right before we went live, I had read a post from a friend, I should say,
Mm,
about a dear friend, that I vehemently disagree with everything that's being purported on her social media site, and I immediately wanted to
mm,
react to that, right?
mm.
And then I thought, well, here I am about to give a Sunday morning service, right? And I'm wanting to stir the pot. Like, is that really the right thing to do? But
Mhm.
I came to the answer, no, it's not. I can honor her, I can love her, not stir the pot, and I can also hold my opinion at the same time,
Yes.
right? So, going back to what you were just speaking of the philosophy and philosophizing, it reminds me of, Ernie says that the teachings of the science of mind is a philosophy and a
Mhm,
faith and a way of life.
mhm.
But he also said that information without application is hallucination. And so
Mm,
what we're called to do and be is aware of what's going on in our mind and then choose whether we want to or not to do something with it and about it.
mm.
Right.
Wait,
So
can you say that again? I want to actually get that. Can you say
which
what he
part?
said again? The hallucination part.
Yes, information
Yeah.
without application is hallucination.
That is so good. May we all take that into our practice this week.
Well, our the CSLLA community knows that I love that quote and I use it often.
Mm,
So,
so
and
good.
there again, I think it takes us back, or I'll speak for myself, but also as the leader here, is that once again, that application does not necessarily mean that you have to heal the world. What
Yes.
it means is it's in that very moment, ask myself,
Mm,
what is out of alignment, right? How can I apply what I know as truth of oneness, that I am peace, power, beauty, joy, light, life, love, and wisdom, and that I live in a universe that is governed by spiritual law, and I'm experiencing life to the degree of my consciousness right now. So
mm,
if I want my experience to be different, I must tend to my consciousness and have it be
mm,
different.
mm,
And
mm.
that's not about going external. That's staying within and just
Mhm,
feeling it and process, and
mhm.
then doing the action that is required.
Yeah, what comes to my mind as I hear you say that, I'm just sort of like mapping that onto my own practice. And what comes to my mind are like the three centers of intelligence that I focus a fair amount on. And, so in our culture, we're very much identified with the mind, our
Yes.
IQ. And we oftentimes are dislocated from our feelings or our EQ, our emotional intelligence, and our BQ, our body intelligence.
Oh,
And what I'm like really always playing with is, and actually I'm mapping this on to the creative process, spirit, soul, body.
right.
So like I'm very interested in my own practice to like there's that which I can understand intellectually. Then I want to move into my emotional state, which I can most easily access in my body. And I think that our willingness to practice self awareness around our IQ, our EQ, and our BQ enables us to move out of the reptilian brain where our reactivity lives. We are living in a hyper reactive human existence right
Yes, we
now.
are.
And we can either play into that and amplify that more, and there are lots of outlets for that, or we can notice the tendency to have the reptilian brain respond and then choose moving into a higher state of consciousness where we have a more integrated sense of self. So,
I love that because when we speak of the reptilian brain, which I love that
mhm,
term because it certainly gives a visual,
mhm,
and it's much like you and I were talking about yesterday in that brief conversation about, well, hey, is that reptilian brain a good thing? The universe took care of the dinosaurs. Thank you, Sandy
mhm,
Rivetta, who's on the right. But when we look at if we're living from letting our reptilian brain be the dominant aspect of our
mhm.
life, and we're not tending to it, then its innate nature is fight or flight.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So then we will be governed by those responses, which are very
Yes,
in an opposition, which then
yes,
we are then living moment by moment in opposition, right?
yes,
And oftentimes that's being governed by something that is so deep, our
yes,
consciousness, and just by the term reptilian goes to show you how long it's existed, right? And if we really understand consciousness, that consciousness is infinite by nature, then we're letting something govern us that is so beyond our own control,
yes.
unless we choose to tend to it. And even
That's
though we're not
right.
controlling it, we're just putting we're using our ability to impact it,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And this to me is the brilliance of this philosophy,
Right,
and what the error can be at times in what I witnessed, the some of our application of it is we want to jump from the body, so that bottom segment of the metaphysical chart, right, the world of
right,
form. We want to jump up to the top third, and we want to circumvent that middle section, which to me, the middle section, the subconscious mind, the houser of our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, our opinions, our memories. We want to circumvent that, what most of us would call spiritual bypass, right? We
right,
go right from the condition to the absolute
right,
truth, which is not wrong. It's just there's a process of integration, untangling, understanding, the shift in consciousness. I mean, very few in the human experience are able to just make that large of a leap, that big of a shift. It's not that it's not possible, but to me, you know, our humility would actually enable us to sit in the soul, in the subjective mind, the subconscious mind, and get wildly curious. What is happening in the collective consciousness of existence that would serve up this set of circumstances and conditions at this moment in the evolution of the human experience?
right. So I have two things for that. One is, so that perfectly leads to the next quote, which is a quote, one of your quotes. And I want to address that in a two-part way. So it says, divine discontent is an invitation to ask, who are you to be? What is yours to do? So I'd like to have you address that, but I'd also like to hear you address that from the perspective of being a spiritual leader, an awakened individual, and a mother of four beautiful beings on this planet who range in age, right? And are having probably radically different experiences during these times of unrest,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Because your oldest child is a woman, a young
mm-hmm,
woman,
mm-hmm,
right? And then your son, Trey, is now what, 20, 20,
20. Mm-hmm,
20. And then you have two younger children who I don't know them, but tell me their
mm-hmm.
names and their ages.
Caroline is 11 and JP is 8.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know just based on my history with Trey is that there's a lot of emotion around the world, treats him as a young African American man,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Yeah.
I get emotional talking about that. So, can you speak to us about what this journey has been like, being just in general a mother and a
Mm-hmm.
leader and all of that during these times of late?
Yeah. It is really interesting. You know, my older two kids, their dad is black. My younger two kids, their dad is white. And we have always had lots of conversations about race in our home at our dinner table. So um, the first thought that I have is I really have come to trust my body, my intuition. Like it's such a great source of wisdom for me. And so if I just look at like the twists and turns of my own career or my own path, my divine discontent has really served as an informant. And I think so many of us are raised to not trust ourselves. And
Hmm.
so then there are these nudges that we get and we're like, "Ah," and one of my great desires is just to support human beings in the ability to trust the wisdom of the nudge of the that lives in each of us. So I'll just say I'm very, very devoted to that practice. I trust discontent in me. I do not make it wrong. It doesn't mean I'm supposed to immediately respond or react, but I
Uh-huh.
take it as information. So that comes up for me. Um, you know, the next thought that's coming up for me is, we went to the first protest in Chicago in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And we took all of our kids. We actually took 3 cars because it was a caravan protest. So we took all 3 of our cars. And we have 7 people that live in our house. So we spread ourselves among those 3 cars. And there was a moment about 4.5 hours in to the protest that I could feel the energy of the experience shifting. And I took that, not saying it's right or what anybody else should do. I'm just saying I took that as, this is my time to leave. This is like, I have contributed what feels like is an alignment for me to contribute, and now I'm choosing to leave. Now, half of our family stayed, and I took the little kids home. I guess I share that story because I think we each have a responsibility to pay attention to what is ours to do in any given moment. There is, what I love about this philosophy is it's not dogmatic. There is not a way that you and I are all supposed to respond. And so what was true for my son and daughter was that they were to stay, and they stayed. What was true for me was I was to leave, and I left. And all of that can coexist, It's interesting. My 8-year-old son said one night as I was putting him to bed, it was something to the effect of, I just feel like, so it was something like, because I'm white, I feel like I'm the bad guy.
Uh-huh.
And he wasn't saying that like intellectually. That was not like a philosophical inquiry. It was like, at a body level, I feel scared because given the way I hear us talk about what's happening on the planet right now, as a little 8-year-old guy, I process that as I'm the bad guy. And it was like, wow, JP, I so appreciate you sharing that with me. And that's not actually the conversation we're having. But in his little brain, that's how he hears it, right? And so then we get to have a conversation like, actually what we're critiquing are systems and structures and policies and positions that move through human beings and affect human beings. But who you are as a, white 8-year-old boy is not inherently bad and wrong. And both of those things can exist.
How
That's
wonderful.
helpful.
Absolutely. Well, it reminds us that no matter where we're at on the journey of our evolution, right, that we can play a role in that. And even JP is aware enough to speak his truth. Right?
Yes.
And he also has trust and faith in you,
Mm-hmm.
right, and his family environment, that he can speak that and there will be healing that comes from it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So he may not understand that from the intellectual perspective of our teaching, but he understands it from the perspective of this divine discontent in me needs to be addressed.
Yes.
So if we are to shift the systems that we're talking about, all of that is required. It is
Mm-hmm.
all required. And as the beloved Dr. Maureen Hoyt always says, is we need to always remember that we live in an and world, not an
Yes.
or world, right? So,
Yes. I always say, how could both of those things be true?
right. Oh, that's a great,
Like,
that's a great question, really. But yeah.
like the conversations I had with a few family members today involved, sort of some polarizing perspectives on what the problems of the world are and how those problems need to be addressed. And, as I sense into what feels true for me and I sense into what I hear being said by these other individuals, it's like all of it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
All of those perspectives make sense to me. And if we're looking for if we're orienting ourselves to say, well, which one is right? Game over. We're already losing.
That's so wise.
But if we can sit and be like, tell me more, I want to understand that perspective more deeply. And if we do that in concert with another, which, for some sounds very Pollyanna.
Well, no, I agree with you because after I had my experience prior to us coming together, as I was taking a shower to get ready, I kept asking myself, what would it feel like to have a conversation with this woman that I love and be open to her answers?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I know myself, and I know that if I had engaged then, I would go in for battle, right? And I
Yes.
know that when I go to battle, I go to win. But
Yes.
if I'm willing to step far enough back and trust the evolutionary process within me, which
Mhm.
exists within all of us, then
Mhm.
it can guide me to a place of love and compassion and understanding, right? And
Yeah. Well, the other thought I have is what if you showed up to that conversation with your heart open versus your heart guarded? Like, like I called a family member this morning and was a weepy mess. And I mean, could almost barely speak. And I am like a masterful communicator. And afterwards, I was a little embarrassed. I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I showed up that untethered to this conversation. And I called my brother, and he's like, but that's a beautiful thing. Like he may never like have that as a practice. And so you demonstrating your messiness and in the spirit of love, like how beautiful.
Oh, so beautiful. So the last quote that I have for us is, and it's also a Lola Wright quote, which I love. Whatever we do in conscious, loving union with the reality right in front of us is prayer.
Hmm. I'm like, where are you getting these quotes? Those are really great.
Oh, girl, I'm out there stalking your social media.
Oh. Yeah, will you say that one more time again? I just
Sure.
want to see, like, what did I mean there?
Whatever we do in conscious, loving union with the reality, uppercase R,
Yeah,
right in front of us is prayer.
yeah. Huh. That's interesting.
What's a
Yeah,
little bit of what you've been speaking on.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I guess what comes to my mind as I hear that is like, and of course, we probably are all familiar with this again cognitively, but the distinction between um, that which we can, sort of the facts of the world, and then the truth of reality. And how do we reconcile those two things? And again, I think, and this perhaps speaks to the quote that you led with from Jim Lockhart, like our ability to mature into the capacity to hold both of those things at the same time. Because historically, what we may do is really deny the facts of the world in reverence to the truth. And I'm not saying that there's not value in doing that, but I think like when Ernest Holmes says turn entirely away from the condition, he's not saying pretend like it doesn't exist.
No.
And that's the big misnomer. I think that's where we get a little tripped up.
I agree with you. And I think it's also important to kind of bring this full circle is that the minute we enter into a battle mentality
Mm,
or a right wrong mentality, right, or a win
yeah,
lose mentality, we're also moving into a fight or flight mentality.
that's
So we're
exactly right.
reverting back to that reptilian brain. My interpretation of your quote here is whatever we do in conscious loving union with the reality, uppercase R, right in front of us is prayer. It's exactly what we were just speaking of looking at what is going on in our reality, that
Mm,
uppercase R. What are we experiencing? And can we come to that from a place of being conscious, meaning like, what the hell's really going on in my brain right now? Like
yes.
what you said you did with your family, right? What I
Yeah.
did with the social media thing this morning. And then ask myself, and these are questions I like to ask myself oftentimes is, what do I believe in this very moment? Right? What do I believe is possible
Mm,
in this very moment? And do I believe in a power that is greater than me?
mm,
The answer is yes. And has it ever failed me?
mm, mhm,
And the answer, of course, is no, it hasn't. And then, well, it never will. And
mm,
so lean into that, which is then that prayer part, because
mhm.
so often we're all believed, once again, reptilian brain, old brain, even maybe reptilian new thought brain, which is
Totally.
prayer is dropping hands to your heart, following 5 steps, 7 steps, 8 steps of treatment. Did I get this? Like, that's not what it is. It's
Mhm,
becoming aware of
mhm,
our ability to use our mind in a
mm.
way to create a different state of mind.
Yes.
And then from that different state of mind, being willing to trust that unfailing power to bring into our experience a reflection of it.
Yes. Yeah,
which
it's
might happen
beautiful.
in 8 seconds. It might not happen for 8 years, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because the law is not governed by time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So our role is to keep tending to that process, those
Mm-hmm.
questions, all of those.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Lola, I love you. I love you
I
with
love you
all my
too.
being. I'm going to close
Mm.
with a quote from you. She's like, girl, where are you getting this stuff? That says this, a Lola Wright quote: slow down, enjoy yourself,
Mm,
play, and have fun.
yeah.
So I can speak for myself, and I know that I can speak for our community. Well, I'm going to speak for myself first. I've never been with you when we haven't had fun. We got to know each other over a little tension right at first years ago, but we've moved that into fun and we've always had fun. Today has been an example of that again, a reflection
Mm,
of it. And I want to do more of that. I'd love to do more of
mhm,
that in this setting as well. I know that for
mhm,
our community, they're all loving being in your presence
mm,
energetically and your wisdom and your light. Thank you for that. Thank you for everything that you have
mm,
done on this planet and all that you are going to do. I know that you're launching a new podcast and a new blog or vlog very soon. You're
mm.
looking at writing a book and you do coaching as well. So everyone can find out all of your information from lolarwright.com, correct?
Yep, you got it.
And follow you all on social media. Well, wonderful. Thank you. I love you. Big claps to you. I'm going to